Welcome everybody to Newsletter Marketing for HR Consultants. This is easily one of the topics our community has been most interested in, and I think there's a really great reason for why newsletter marketing is really the perfect fit for HR consultants and how they sell services. So today we'll be diving into how to launch your HR consulting newsletter, things you should know before you get started, tools that are really great for you to use. My name is Dominic. I'm the founder and CEO at Sherlock. We are an all-in-one solution for HR consultants, specifically looking to shift away from running their business on sticky notes and spreadsheets, or potentially clean up the 5 to 6 different software solutions you're using to power the business. We have an all-in-one platform that covers you for client management, project management, scheduling, keeping track of clients, team members. It's a really robust platform. We're super proud of it. And we've been building this community of HR consultants and fractional HR leaders for the past year. So thank you for being a part of this journey with us. Today, we are joined by Sonia. Sonia and I met many, many years ago and have just stayed in each other's orbit for a long time. But I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Sonia, to introduce yourself.
Of course. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited. My name is Sonia Bastranen, and I'm the founder of 1111 Marketing. I have been doing newsletter and email marketing for 15 years, and I've helped brands from as big as Uber to one-person founder teams set up their newsletter marketing, and I believe that content is king. And I'm really excited today to show you all how you can use a newsletter to grow your business basically while you sleep.
So our agenda for today will be exploring Sherlock's all-new 40-page playbook, the HR Consultant's Guide to Newsletter Marketing. For everyone who registered for this event, you should have received a link to this playbook in your email. For those of you who are watching this asynchronously and haven't already received a copy of this playbook, go ahead and take out your phone, scan that QR code. It'll take you to a landing page on our website where you can get access to your free copy of this playbook. It's some really juicy stuff. We've created a lot of robust content where we're going to be covering why newsletters work specifically for HR consultants, how to define your HR newsletter strategy, finding the right tools, launching a newsletter, and then really the anatomy of what a perfect HR newsletter looks like. One thing I will say is this entire session was inspired by an HR consultant I got to know who built a 6-figure HR consulting business on the back of a HR newsletter. And she did all of that while she was working in-house. So stick around to the end. We will be diving into the exact playbook for how that happened. How did she build a 6-figure business without a website and without her employer knowing? It's something we can all adapt and learn from. So let's go ahead and dive into the content. Why newsletters work for HR consultants. I've said something like this before in our previous sessions, but selling HR services is all about timing. There's a few reasons why. One, your service is not transactional. You're selling trust, you're selling expertise, you're selling yourself and the relationship. And this is where, when you think about trust, trust is built over time and consistent presence. And so from a timing perspective, trust doesn't happen overnight. Something else that is worth mentioning is that awareness and visibility sometimes matter more than expertise. You can have a ton of credentials and a really incredible career behind you, but that expertise won't actually get you in front of clients. It might help you land a signed contract, but you need some way of maintaining awareness and visibility with people, because oftentimes they don't begin their search when they're ready for support with who's the most qualified HR professional. They say, what solution can solve my problem? And you want to make sure that you're top of mind when that question happens. The last piece of this is part of why it's so hard to sell HR consulting services is because business owners love to delay HR support, either intentionally or unintentionally. A lot of times it comes down to, I think, budget or even lack of awareness of what HR can do for their business. Or sometimes their teams have been so small that they kind of just get away with it for a long time until inevitably something bubbles over and they're in crisis. And that's where the timing piece really comes into play, where they're looking for a solution. They're looking for it fast, and they're going to be turning to the most present solutions that are around them. I've worked for enterprise grade HR outsourcing companies. They spend millions of dollars every month to make sure that they have ads on the radio, to make sure they're on the front pages of Google, to make sure that they're the first recommendations that appear in AI-powered search. That's not how you're going to play the game, right? You need to approach this differently. And I think that's part of why relationship building is so valuable for HR consultants. And that's why newsletters are such a great tool, because you don't need to have all of that crazy spend. You just need to make contact and maintain presence until the timing is right. So newsletters solve the timing gap by keeping you present with your potential clients during the months, sometimes years, between the first touch point and a signed contract, simply by showing up in their inbox on a schedule with something worth reading. And so this whole strategy really boils down to making a connection with someone that could be a client in the future and staying consistent and present with them with value until they actually feel ready. And you may even find that if that person is experiencing value from you, even if they don't convert, they might invite someone they know to share in the value that they experience, and then that person signs up. And so this is really why newsletters are such a perfect fit for HR consultants, because you can take a discovery call with a client, but unless they feel ready to commit to HR support, they're not signing a contract. So why do other marketing channels fall short? There's actually a really strong argument for every one of these marketing channels. I play in all of them because I love marketing, but each of them alone has some weak points, right? So when we think about referrals, referral leads for HR consultants are easily among the best leads that you'll get for the business, but they're inherently unpredictable. You can't predict when a referral is going to be made. You can't predict when your referral network, you can't predict if they're going to be able to detect when there's someone in their network who is primed for your service. And so this is where referrals can just introduce unpredictability, and they're really great for launching your business, but long-term, it can feel very unreliable. And it's something that you want to move away from and start having other channels to support you. Social media, we talked about awareness and maintaining visibility. Take a look at a platform like LinkedIn. You could be posting every single day, guilty. And that's a great way to build awareness and familiarity with your audience, but you're also relying on an algorithm. I know for a fact that not all of my best ideas are reaching all the people I want them to reach. And so that's where I think social media can be a little bit limiting, because any given day, LinkedIn can change its algorithm, and now you're left scrambling to stay in touch with this network that I've been building. Of course, there's public speaking, which can happen on podcasts or even when you take the stage, which unless you own the channel, let's say you own the podcast, there's no great mechanism for following up. So if you're invited to do a public speaking event for someone else, or even at an event, it can be difficult to actually get in contact with people that were in the room with you. And lastly, SEO and AEO, I've already hit on this. These big payroll HR outsourcing companies, they spend millions of dollars to make sure that they're ranking first on Google, to make sure that they're appearing in AI-powered search. And it's not that you can't achieve success there, but that strategy does reward scale, budget, and time. And so it's something that, does provide you with an extra entry point, but it's not always the most achievable if you're a solo consultant. So this is where newsletter marketing fits in. And it's worth mentioning, this is not a standalone strategy, because newsletters only work if you have subscribers. And so your other marketing channels, you should think about them as an entry point to the newsletter so that you can nurture them over time. But you need those entry points. And so whatever entry points make the most sense for you, that's something that you should keep part of your marketing ecosystem, and use a newsletter as the backbone to keep people invested in you, what you have to say over time. So with all of that out of the way, we now know newsletters are perfect for HR consultants. Sonia, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you to talk about defining your strategy.
Absolutely. Right. Now that we know that a newsletter can work for you and be this really great cornerstone for your growth, how do we do it? We're going to go through 5 decisions to make before you start writing. This is a classic misstep. I would say I see a lot of people, they want to jump right into, okay, it's a newsletter, I'm going to create the content and just simply start sending. But somebody's inbox is a very intimate place to be. I don't know about you all, but it does bother me if brands send me millions of emails, one every day. It lives in the phone in our pocket. So it's a very close marketing channel, right? It feels very intimate. And we want to make sure that the content we're sending is thought out and strategic. This will also help you for long-term growth, as well as help you not get stuck along the way. So we need to set up the sandbox that we're going to play in before we get creative. The first question you're going to ask yourself is to clarify your target audience. It's going to be really hard to write to someone you don't know who you're writing a letter to, right? Just think about the mail or an email. You know who this is going to be sending to. That's the same with newsletter marketing. So how do we do that? For HR specifically, you can ask yourself, what industry do my clients work in, or my clients that I want to connect with, the company size, the role and title of who is actually going to be reading your newsletter, right? So an executive officer is very different than the HR coordinator. And then finally, location for regulatory topics. And depending on what kind of newsletter content you decide to go with, you'll want to know where these people are located so that, again, the content is timely and it's relevant for them.
So I'll go ahead and just talk about two examples just to be really clear. So we have audience A, executive directors of 501c3 nonprofit organizations in New York City with 15 to 75 employees, versus audience B, founders and CEOs of VC-backed startups in San Francisco, California with 200 employees. We're seeing different industries, we're seeing different locations, different company sizes. These two audiences are going to care about very different things. They experience different hiring challenges, they experience different funding challenges. And so this is where I think understanding who your audience is so valuable. And you can have a newsletter that's for a part of your client audience. You don't necessarily need to have a newsletter that's a perfect fit for every type of client you work with. And so I've talked about niching down before. Newsletters are a great space to do that because relevance to the audience that you define is going to be really important.
And I would add to that, a lot of people want to make something generic that fits every audience. The more niche you are, the more effective your newsletter is going to be, actually. So trying to go smaller versus wider appeal, it's a little counterintuitive, but it'll help with your growth much more. And then once you know who you're writing for, that sets you up for success as far as choosing your content focus. Like I said, content is king. This is where the meat and bones of your newsletter is going to live. But you want to choose what you're going to write about because, again, it will either become overwhelming or irrelevant to your audience if your content is not focused. So you need to sit at the intersection of two things. What does your audience care about and what do you actually do? So this is not the time to write about some exploratory new industry that you're trying to grow into. Write about what you know first, and that will keep you on track.
We actually have a question in the audience, Sonia. Should you have a newsletter for each particular target segment?
This is an awesome question. So this is called segmentation. And I would say this is a little more on the intermediate level of newsletter marketing. But if you have a larger list, I would say if you have over 50 people who would be interested in two different sets of content, then you can make two different sets of your newsletter. Now, if it's smaller than that, again, I'm going to recommend that you just write about what you know, what's the majority of the work you do, and go with that route first. And then as you grow your newsletter, you can start to think of big topics and then niche down, right? So maybe it's the minimum wage in California is different than Colorado, right? And I have clients both in Colorado and California. So I'm going to make two different versions of this newsletter, segment them, and send them to separate audiences. So I say yes, target segment, any kind of personalization will make your newsletter more successful because it's relevant to your reader, but it's probably not worth the time and effort if you don't have a larger list. So think about your audience size when you're deciding whether you need those two different versions.
Amazing. So understanding the topic is sort of one piece of the puzzle. Understanding how you deliver that content is the structure behind the topic. For HR consultants specifically, there's a number of content formats that are useful. One is an insights newsletter. It's pretty low effort because this is essentially you sharing your original perspective on a topic. This shouldn't be the kind of perspective you could get from the internet. This is where your expertise is going to be really valuable. And it's part of what you're showcasing to these potential clients is how you think and how you communicate information. Super flexible because this is just what am I going to be writing about. Reader value, it's medium. It can vary depending on what you choose to talk about. For curated updates, this is definitely more of a high effort content format where every month you're sharing like regulatory updates, news in the industry. And it's high effort because that does require you to actually stay very up to date on what's going on. The flexibility is a little bit lower because if you say I'm sharing monthly compliance updates, and then you can't really start posting about original perspectives on topical HR things, people expect monthly updates on compliance. Reader value is generally quite high here because it's so timely. There's, of course, case studies and lessons where you can talk about real client situations, anonymized, of course. But this can be really helpful for you to signal the types of work that you do, the types of impact that you achieve. The one thing I would say with a case studies newsletter format is it does require some experience with clients. And so this is probably not the best entry point for new HR consultants because you want to have those real case studies and like, don't make up your case studies. Have them be real, have them be actionable. I think a quality case study does have numbers behind it. And so when you have those real situations you can share, that's a great format. And then lastly, educational mini guides. These can be checklists, these can be how-to guides. They can be a little bit more effort in the sense that these are oftentimes more like downloadable resources or checklists/PDFs. But now you have newsletters where people are getting resources that they find really valuable. You've all seen this strategy in action. You're getting playbooks along with each of these webinars. That takes time and effort, but there's a lot of reader value if you're sharing content that they're interested in. So that's the format, which is separate from the topic, but pretty closely tied together.
Yeah, it's basically like your topic, how it's going to come to life.
Yes.
One thing I would say on this too, that's a bit of a pro tip, is just be very realistic about the time and effort you can put in. So even if it's like, oh, I really want to do curated updates, but as soon as some news article comes out and I need to respond to it, and I don't have an hour reliably every week to dedicate to this, you can put that in your back pocket. And as your newsletter grows and maybe a bit of your time frees up, you can start to add different formats in, but that's farther along the way. So this ties really closely into that, right? You're going to need to select a frequency and send schedule because the consistency part of a newsletter is what's going to not only build your newsletter over time, but it's also that relationship building, that trust that keeps you top of mind for those potential leads and clients. And so being realistic here about what you can do with your time right now, how you can fit a newsletter in, is going to be important at the offset, because you don't want to get farther along and then not have time or drop off. If you do drop off, you can always come back. But the things you'll want to think about as far as frequency and send schedule is how often do I want to send? So weekly, bi-weekly, monthly. I normally recommend a monthly newsletter if you're just getting started, because then you can start to get used to how long that takes for you. And over time, it'll become faster. And then maybe you can bump it up to bi-weekly. And then when you're going to send it. So how frequently and when. It's easy to just pick a day of the month or a day of the week and treat this like any other call or client deliverable that you have. This is part of your sales funnel. So it's going to help your revenue, and you need to treat it with the gravitas of that. And so making time in your calendar, every first Monday of every week, I'm sending a newsletter, or every second Tuesday of the month, the 15th of every month, I'm sending my newsletter. This also helps you build it as a habit for yourself so that you grow it over time. Newsletter is a long-term game. And so you want to be able to set up a cadence for you that will work for a while. Great. And then once you have what you're going to talk about, you know who you're talking to, how often you're going to talk to them. Now we want to know, what are we trying to do? Any kind of marketing, you'll want to have a goal in mind. For newsletter goals specifically, there's a variety of things that a newsletter can help you do. It can help you generate warm leads as far as a growth machine to get those potential discovery calls. It can engage prospects, so people who are already slightly familiar, but it wasn't that time to convert, like what Dominic talked about at the beginning of this. It keeps them warm, right? It keeps you top of mind. You can nurture referrals, so stay in touch with those people who heard about you through another client, and it can establish your authority. So you all are the experts here, and a newsletter is a great way to have your expertise become visible. Now, a lot of you are going to have, maybe you're like, what if I want multiple? You can have a couple goals, or maybe your goal sits in between two of these. That's perfectly fine, but we just need, at least we need to know where the finish line is, what we're trying to do, or else we'll have no way to evaluate if the content that we're writing is doing what we want it to do. So I would say challenge yourself to pick at least one, but make sure you pick the direction here so that you know where you're going, and then you'll be able to make adjustments along the way of your newsletters and how successful they're going to be.
Yeah, gotta name your goal, right?
Yes. We want to know where we're going.
Yeah.
Okay, and so now we know kind of who we're talking to, how often we're going to send. We have the sandbox, right? Now we need somewhere to make that newsletter come to life. There are a million tools out there. My advice to you all is to not get too hung up on this. It can be overwhelming, but picking the right tool, you can always change it later. Even though that sometimes becomes a bit of a project, just know it's not, I find that this is another piece where people overthink it, and it's much more important to get started. But also, we're going to go through a few for you right now so that you at least know the ones that I have come across, recommend, and used with clients. So the most low barrier to entry is Substack. Substack it's free for as far as the subscriber list. So if you have a large subscriber list already and you just want to get started with your newsletter, it's very low barrier to entry. The tech is easy to use. You'll jump in right away and be able to develop your content. It is great for getting started quickly. The downside is that as you grow, it is not meant for large sends. And as far as Christopher's point with the technical aspect of breaking up different audiences, it can be a little more manual in that way. Which leads us to our second option here, which is Beehive. And Beehive is better for those large sends. It's built for growth. So whereas Substack, you might be starting small, and then if your newsletter grows to thousands and thousands of people and you want to start segmenting more, you might have to move over to Beehive. But if you already have a pretty professional idea of what you want your newsletter to be, and you have a larger list, Beehive is a great option. It's also really easy to use, and the pricing tiers are relatively affordable for the technical pieces that they offer.
Quick question for you in the chat. What do you consider to be a large send?
Yeah, that's a great question. I should define that. So I would say if your newsletter, if you have subscribers over about 2,000, you might want to think about how can I start either testing as far as different content pieces to see what works better, or you're going to start segment by location or role, depending on what your list is. And that's when you want to use something like Beehive, because setting up those tests where maybe I'm sending half my group something about the What's a good example, Dominic? Like changing laws in California or paid
Right.
leave in
You'd only want
California.
those to go to California subscribers.
Right. So something like Substack, you would have to tag your list manually, and it's a little more manual to set that up. Something like Beehive, it's intuitive. The platform will intake those people for you with those tags, and also setting up the different versions of your content is easy. So anything over like 2K, I would say you have a large list, a larger send. Awesome. Great question. Moving on. So the third option we have here is Kit. You might have heard of this. It used to be called ConvertKit. They're a long-standing tool. So whereas Beehive's a little newer, Kit, it has been around for ages. And if you have that like 2K list, this would be another good option. But you do have to start to pay a little bit more as your list grows and as you start to use more of those technical aspects. Their software and the tooling that they have, they charge a little bit more for it. But if you're at a place where you're like, I've been trying to do my newsletter for a year or so, I've grown it, and I think it's time to level up, do some of these things that I'm suggesting as far as testing or segmenting. This is a great tool if you're like committed to long-term growth and you already kind of have evidence of that growth, that what you spend on this and invest in it, you'll get an ROI on it. And then our final one that we're going to go over is MailChimp. So MailChimp has also been around forever. It's been around since I started email marketing, and a lot of people are already on MailChimp. So we wanted to include it because they have a lot of legacy users. I would say if you're new to newsletter marketing and you're just starting out for the first time, MailChimp, there's more tools like Beehive and Substack that have come out specifically for newsletters. MailChimp was made for email marketing in general. So if you have a larger company where you need to manage a lot of clients and you want to have a full stack marketing email machine, MailChimp is a great option, but it is a bit more enterprise than these other options that we're overviewing. MailChimp also sits in a bucket of, if y'all have come across something like Customer.io, Klaviyo, some of those bigger email tools, MailChimp sits in that category. So I would also say if you're not already on MailChimp, but you think I have a large list and I need that enterprise kind of tooling, you could do research on those ones too. But again, they're not made for newsletters specifically. So some of the UI with the design is going to be a little more technical to use and not as fast, which then I'm always worried that then the consistency will drop off, which, like I said, that's your foundation, and that's a great marker for success.
Quick question for you. What about HubSpot?
HubSpot. Okay, HubSpot, very popular. Again, I would say HubSpot is if you are looking for more of an enterprise solution, and generally I also don't recommend HubSpot because it's so technical. So the good thing about HubSpot is you can personalize it. You can do a lot of complicated technical things in HubSpot. If you are inexperienced with email marketing, that can cause a lot of missends and mistakes. And it's the worst thing ever when you accidentally send your California newsletter to your Florida segment. Those kinds of mistakes are really easy to do in HubSpot because it's so customizable. So I generally think the UI is a little more technical than what I would recommend for HR consultants. But if you do feel comfortable in your technical ability to build complicated automations and keep every single contact on your list straight, then HubSpot is very customizable.
Someone's asking, what about using LinkedIn's built-in newsletter feature? Do you have any thoughts on that one?
So I think that the LinkedIn one is very, I know some people who have found it extremely effective. My thought on the LinkedIn one is it's not as brandable. And so you kind of lose your own personalization. And we're going to talk about LinkedIn in a minute as well, is that I don't think LinkedIn is the place where you're generating retention. Your newsletter, right? this is what your newsletter is going to do. Generate your warm leads. LinkedIn can help with that. Engage prospects. So this is where these three: engage prospects, nurture referrals, and establish authority. So LinkedIn can help with these. But in the sense of your newsletter itself, as far as staying present and top of mind, not everyone checks LinkedIn all the time. If you're targeting clients who have small businesses, they're not on LinkedIn like we are, but they are on their email. So I think it's a little bit different because it's the method, right? It's the median of the content, which is you're showing up in their inbox. Way more likely they will see you in their inbox. Now, if you are targeting maybe fellow consultants, LinkedIn might be a good idea, but it's not fulfilling the same space. And so if you only have LinkedIn, you're kind of separating your authority, right?
Right. And I think with LinkedIn's tool, it's an alert on LinkedIn, but you don't own the actual contact, right? Like you don't have that person's email. So this other layer does get you closer to the prospect than LinkedIn's built-in tool. It's essentially a really fancy posting mechanism. It's not giving you that second layer. So yeah, great call out there.
Okay, great. Thank you for chiming in. If you are just evaluating which tool is best for you and you're just getting started, these are the things that we recommend you look for. Deliverability. Deliverability is basically how many emails of my newsletter ended up in someone's inbox. Did it get flagged as spam? Did it get flagged in the promotions folder of Gmail? We don't want that, right? We want to appear right in their main inbox so that we are always keeping that retention and relationship alive. So look for whatever the email provider or newsletter provider says about their deliverability. Most of them will even have a metric. You want your deliverability to be over 95%, closer to 98 is better. Mm-hmm. And then subscriber management. So when we say subscribers, we also mean like contacts or the people on your list, the literal emails. If you can add, remove, tag people, these are my California residents, these are my Florida residents, and then view how many people subscribed, that is really key because as you grow, you'll want to be able to use that easily. And then formatting tools, this is actually literally building your email, what it looks like, designing it, and how the UI is as far as modules to pull in your different pieces of content, how easy it is to actually build. These aren't text-only emails, right? They're like branded and then text emails. So you want it to be quick and intuitive. And then analytics. Again, now that we know what our goals are, we will want to evaluate how our newsletter is doing. And so you want a tool that will give you some of the metrics that we'll go over a little later. And you can use this slide deck as well as your playbook to have a little checklist of which analytics to look for.
Absolutely.
Additional tools. So these are going to be supplemental to your newsletter. So your newsletter is kind of the honey that attracts people, right? But then to keep them staying around and also to have this ecosystem of growth where you are getting those warm leads, you're keeping yourself top of mind for potential clients. These things will make your newsletter pop and more professional. A landing page builder. So these are really easy to find. That some of the email platforms have these already, or you can just use your own website, Squarespace, WordPress, whatever you use right now, because some of your newsletters, you might want to send people elsewhere, right? They're going to click through to something. Maybe it's not always your booking call landing page, but you're talking about a very specific topic and you are offering some kind of package on your site. You'll want a landing page to send them to. LinkedIn Premium. So this is the growth aspect of your list, right? We just talked about LinkedIn. It's going to get eyes on you on LinkedIn, but then to capture them in your newsletter, where then you can be in their inbox, you can use it to grow your actual list. And then we love Sherlock. When you have a very big list and there's a lot of people who are warm, ready to engage, you can keep everyone very organized. And as your newsletter grows, you want something that scales with you, and Sherlock will do that. So you can keep track of everyone to follow up with them. If you get really advanced eventually, maybe you see, oh, there's a group of people who have opened every single newsletter. I need to reach out to them separately. Things like that, where it will just become impossible to track people once it's, over 100. We need a CRM like Sherlock, and we highly recommend Sherlock to do that for us. Do you have anything to add about Sherlock, Dominic?
Yeah, no, I would think about your email subscriber list as like, they're not cold leads, they're warm leads, they're engaged with you, there's a relationship there, but they're not hot leads, right? Like these are people who aren't necessarily ready to convert long-term. Sherlock is really geared towards like, you have a discovery call that's happened with them, you need to record that conversation, you want to follow up like with actual calls or emails. So it's like that second layer of the relationship where it's not just subscriber based, but definitely we can support there. I did have a quick question in the chat, and then we're going to breeze through how to actually launch the newsletter. But someone asked about anti-spam laws and what you recommend for newsletter subscribers. I think the easiest answer here is just make sure people are opting in, right? And there's a number of different things you can do. We'll talk about this too. Don't just add people to your subscriber list if they don't expect to be receiving emails from you, especially for areas like Canada with more rigorous anti-spam legislation, making sure that people actively say, I want to be on this list, I want this content. Sonia, I will turn it over to you to get us through 10 steps for launching the program. I will say, all of you joining us, we do have all 10 of these steps laid out very specifically in your playbook. So we'll talk about them at a high level just to make sure that you get the content, but we can, of course, dive in more deeply with that playbook.
Yes, this is in detail in the playbook, and I want to save room for questions. So we're going to breeze through these. So once you're actually building your newsletter, the step one is just to define your minimum viable newsletter, your MVN. So one target audience. This is if you're just getting started, right? One topic focus, one content format, and one send cadence. Start with those, pick one, and don't overthink it. And then once you have that, know that you can always go back and improve upon them. Your newsletter is going to grow in complexity as well as subscribers in the future. Then you're going to set up your newsletter infrastructure after you've picked the tool that works for you. There's going to be a bit of technical setup. So you're going to set up an account. You're going to want to create a separate email address that's not your personal business email address to send the newsletter out of. Most tools walk you through this. And then you're going to create basic branding. So what's the name of your newsletter, a description, going back to what topic you're going to be talking about, and then a header image, as well as a footer. So you're going to basically get some of the functionalities in place that you'll just need that will be evergreen. And then you're going to create a custom welcome email. I highly recommend this on all platforms because that means when someone does opt in, you're automatically sending them something that introduces who you are, the topic you've chosen, everything we've gone over so far, and you're already giving them value. You're saying, welcome to this space that I've curated for you, building trust right off the bat. Step 3 is to create 3 newsletter topics. We're going to recommend that you do at least 3 newsletters for your first sentence. And to come up with newsletter topics, this is a question I get a lot. Well, what should I write about? These are some of the questions you can consider. And I would just spend 10, 20 minutes to reflect on them. It will become clear very quickly what your newsletter topic should be. It's mostly about your expertise. So what do your clients ask about? What mistakes are you always addressing when you get a new client? Policy or compliance changes? And then what do founders and executives assume? Help get them on the right track. Again, this is where your expertise comes in, and we're making you visible for that. Step 4 is to write your first newsletter. This is really important. We're targeting 300 to 700 words. I also see people get really excited and go really long form. If you happen to sit down to write your newsletter and all of a sudden you have 1,000 words, great, you've just written 2 newsletters. You don't want to flood people's inboxes. Again, especially for the kind of client you have, it's likely that these people are extremely busy. So we want to get to our point. We want to give them the content and the expertise and then let them go on with their day. Do not write too technically. Don't change your voice. Just stick with your own personal brand. So the same way you talk to clients should be the way you talk to people in your newsletter. It doesn't have to be this completely different persona. And then don't spend more than 2 hours on your first draft. People do get caught up in perfectionism at this stage. I have a friend who didn't launch her newsletter because she couldn't find the perfect name for it. And she lost 6 months on that. We don't want that. We just want to get your expertise out in the world, get you to be more visible, and then you can build from there. No one's going to worry if you change your newsletter name down the line. That's completely fine. But you do need to start. Step 5 is going to be either importing or adding your first subscribers, so those people on your list. You do not need a large list to launch. I launched with 18 people. And this can be your close friends or current and past clients, professional contacts, people who have tapped your shoulder for something in the last year, and colleagues or peers. Now, touching on the opt-in, there's an easy way to do this. You're just going to make sure that everyone who you add has given you their permission to receive your content. Most of these sites will take care of it for you. So if you already have a list, you can generate an automatic opt-in and it will take care of it for you. Or you can use LinkedIn to tap them and pitch your newsletter. And that's also a really good practice for talking about what value you're bringing to the table and getting crystal clear on your topic and your niche. And then you're going to send your first newsletter for step 6. The biggest thing here that I want you all to know is to send a test email to yourself. This is where you can see what your newsletter will look like on mobile, which a lot of people skip. And you might catch some misspellings or typos on the test send that you just keep having a blind eye to because you've read it so many times in the actual UI of your email provider.
Check any links you include too.
Yeah, click on your links. Make sure they're going to where you intend them to go and they're not broken. And then once you've gotten your first newsletter out of the way, congratulations. I will be very proud of you. And this is when you're going to prepare for your next send and schedule time to write at the cadence that you've chosen. Now, this should be a pretty quick step because you've already defined that sandbox you played in. And then you're just getting into the habit of drafting, sending, and delivering that content on a very consistent basis, which is part of what builds the trust. And then step 8, now you can grow your newsletter. So if you're just writing to, like I was, the 18 people who I knew, that's great. And they will stay engaged. But what we want is to build it over time. So there's a lot of easy places you can just plug in your newsletter. Whatever tool you use, there will be an easy link where you can plug it into your website, use it on your LinkedIn, add it to your email signature, and any kind of client onboarding you have, add it there too. These will be in place forever. They're evergreen places where it will build your list over time. And then if you want to get more advanced about it, you can start to think about promoting your newsletter once you really have your niche and that cadence and you know that you can reliably deliver that content as well. Step 9 is track what matters. This is where the analytics come in. This can also be overwhelming, but the biggest things we would say you need to focus on in these first few months is, are you sending consistently, building that trust so that when you ask people to subscribe, you're following through on your word? Are people opening it? This is called open rate. All of the tools that we've recommended will show you your open rate. It should be really easy to find. That can let you know if the content you're writing about is relevant to your audience. And then our conversation started from it. Have you at least gotten any verbal feedback? I thought that was really interesting. And then you at least know that it's resonating. Step 10 is committing to 3 sends before pivoting. So we would recommend 3 newsletters because if you go through these metrics and say, yes, I'm sending consistently, but people aren't opening, but you've only sent one newsletter so far, that doesn't mean anything. Also, the email services themselves, so Gmail, Yahoo, Outlook, they do reward consistent sending as well. So they will surface your content in inboxes if you're consistent and people open it. So send at least 3 before you decide, okay, this isn't really working. I haven't gotten any conversations started. I need to rethink my topic. And that's when you could go back to the launching your newsletter section and just go through it again with a different strategy. But don't make any decisions early on. Most people give up too quickly. They'll send one and say, well, no one booked a call from my one send. Again, people are busy. They need to get used to hearing from you, and then you'll start to see these things come through.
Right. Kind of just go full circle back to timing. This whole strategy does take time. And so you're not going to likely get a scheduled consultation off your first send. If this is a topic that's interesting to you and you're ready to start, thinking about getting your HR consulting newsletter launched, we've created an incredible guide for like every piece of what a newsletter should be. This is all in your playbook. So you'll see things like, what should the subject line look like? How long should it be? What is pre-header text and what should I write there? We've created so much great guidance. Again, like you can have an email header that looks really polished and branded. You can also just use text only. And so all of these major components of an email are going to be available for you here with guidance on what you should say in each section, how you should be including CTAs, what should be included in the email footer. I did want to spend some time really quickly to talk about this 6-figure HR consulting newsletter case study where there was an HR consultant who she was working in-house. She wasn't consulting yet. She was thinking about launching. And by the time that she was ready to launch her business, she had 4,000 newsletter subscribers and roughly $160,000 in client contracts already signed. And it was all done from newsletter marketing. I will say it took time. Her newsletter monthly growth was about 20%, very healthy. She hit that 4,000 in less than 2 years, right? This is a long-term play. I mean, I've been building my list for about 12 months now, and I'm about 2,000 subscribers. And so it does take time, but it does start to compound, especially if you're creating quality content. But also if you're a solo consultant, you don't need thousands of people on your list. You need a couple hundred engaged people. And of course, subscribers who are engaged with your content, they do convert. And so this is where you can generate revenue from your newsletter because the people that are dialed in, they're curious about what you have to say, they want to sign a contract and they want to work with you. So what this consultant did is she picked a specific niche. She focused on California employers with 15 to 75 employees. California is notoriously compliance heavy, and this size of a company doesn't always have internal support. She signed up with an employment law service that allowed her to get easy access to their database of regulatory updates that she just shared with the email subscribers. Her outreach to people on LinkedIn was really human. She sent a message to about 20 people per day saying, hey, I saw you're running a business in California. It's a nightmare to stay up to date with compliance laws. I created a free newsletter where I share those updates. Do you want to be added to the list? And at the end of every email, she had a CTA. Do you want to schedule time with me? And so this is where we had a very consistent process for building that list and getting people on board. And it really worked to her benefit because she did this for long enough to see those results. So the strategy ultimately expanded with intention. It started with California, then moved to other employee-friendly states like New York, Washington, Oregon. This is just one example of how a strategy works. This, of course, is an intermediate strategy with segmentation, but when you're sharing something valuable, the results are there. Sonia has an incredible offer for us today. She helped put together all of this great content, and she has worked with our team to create the HR newsletter launch kit. So if you're interested in launching an HR newsletter, you can sign up to get 2 one-to-one coaching sessions with Sonia, where she'll define your newsletter strategy, guide your outreach, and help build skills. You can get account implementation. She'll help set up your account to make sure that your email list is imported, your list is properly cleaned up, get your dashboard ready to go, and create a custom domain to be sending from. And then you'll also be getting 12 months. This is crazy, Sonia. This is such an incredible offer. Thank you. 12 months of HR newsletter content for a monthly newsletter. So this is hands off. You don't need to be worrying about what to write about. She'll be working with you to help come up with those topics over the course of a year. So normally this package is worth $1,000 because Sonia is such a great friend to Sherlock. You can take 20% off of this $1,000 to get this full package for $800. If you're interested, go ahead and scan that QR code. You will be receiving a link with this offer in your inbox following the session. But I just wanted to share that with you because as you saw, like, we're already running out of time. We could spend another hour on this topic. There's so much that goes into it and it's not totally intuitive. So go ahead, scan that QR code if you're ready to start an HR consulting newsletter. And then also join our newsletter. We'd love to have you join for events for the community. Amazing. Thank you so much, Sonia. It's been such a treat to have you and to work on this resource with you. For everyone who joined us here today, thank you for being part of this community. We are hosting events just like this once a month with different experts covering different topics on building a business. I hope you all have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.